Welcome to the Politics Guys. I'm Michael Baranowski, a political scientist at Northern Kentucky University. With me today is my co-host, attorney and Republican strategist, Jay Carson. It's been yet another chaotic week in the Trump administration, which of course was highlighted by the firing of White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci only 10 days after his appointment was announced and even before his first official day on the job. Wow. Yeah. Now, one version of events, of course, is that Scaramucci was removed because he accomplished his main mission, which was removing former White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus, who was replaced by former Marine General and former Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly. So at this point, Donald Trump is on his second chief of staff, his second national security advisor, his second press secretary, and his fourth communications director once he finds someone to take that big prize of a job, all in less than 7 months. So Jay, what do you make of these latest personnel changes, and what would you say are the odds that Kelly can right the ship?
Oh, I have no idea as far as the odds, just because, look, I'm not there. I don't know any of these people personally. I don't know how they'll react. I think certainly Kelly coming in and the immediate dismissal of Scaramucci. If you are, if you're a Republican, you have to be very much heartened by this. When Trey and I talked last week, there was very much the sense that Scaramucci, once now that he would be in, he would almost be a de facto chief of staff, with Priebus out, and that was sort of a victory for the Trumpians over your more traditional people who worked in the political process. But I mean, it was pretty short lived, and my sense is that Kelly taking that first big step and quick step really should send a message. Again, I don't know how well that message gets heeded, and my concern with the message getting heeded is less from the lower level White House employees and more from the president himself. There have been reports, though, that he has already taken some pretty big steps to change the culture of the White House staff, as far as who has access to the president, who has just when they're showing up for work. I mean, just that kind of stuff, and imposing more discipline.
Yeah, apparently even Ivanka and Jared now need to go through Kelly to actually get FaceTime with the president, which is a big change. And I think Priebus was always a bad choice, not necessarily because he's a weak person or anything like that, but because I don't think he ever had the trust of the president, and so you bring in someone like Kelly. Pretty clearly, Donald Trump likes generals, respects generals to the extent he respects anyone. And so certainly, if, as you said, if you're a conservative, this has to be heartening, suggesting that maybe there's going to be at least a little bit of order out of all of this chaos so far. But of course, the real test is what's going to happen when Kelly tells the president to not do something that the president wants to do for his own good. And we haven't seen what that's going to be like yet, and I'm sure that will come sooner rather than later.
We'll know it when we see it, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really think we will. There will be the tweet, and you'll have to say, "Geez, did Kelly know about this?" That sort of thing. But we'll see.
I guess in the end, I think that this might make a marginal difference, but I also think that the president is who he is, and he's not. I can't imagine him changing in any fundamental way. Now, maybe, I guess the positive way to spin this, if you're a Trump supporter or you believe in some of the stuff that Donald Trump wants to do, is that, well, if he's faced with the very real possibility that his presidency would be an abject failure, maybe he'll be willing to sort of pull back and let his people direct him or rein him in. But I don't know that I buy that exactly. That sounds more like a rational calculation, and I don't really know that the president, given what we know of his character, is capable of doing that, even if the stakes are as high as they clearly are here.
Yeah. Well, and again, you had pointed out on some of the Facebook posts, Trump's been playing a lot of golf, and again, that may be heartening to a lot of conservatives, probably heartening to liberals too. If Trump is of the management mind, and maybe he is, that, look, I'm just going to hire the best people. I'm going to get Kelly in there, let him run the White House. I'm going to go play some golf. That, in a lot of ways, if you're a conservative, you're really pretty happy with that. Again, I'm not going to comment is it sort of anti-democratic a little bit in that Trump is the guy elected, but if Kelly's running the show. But from a competency standpoint, I think most people would be more comfortable with Kelly running the show.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So we'll see what happens. But you're right. Eventually, there's going to come at some point. There's going to be some sort of test where we'll see, if Trump's going to follow Kelly's lead. So.
All right, before we move on, we'd like to thank our first sponsor today, ZipRecruiter. Everyone knows that good help is hard to find. I mean, even the president can't seem to find and keep quality people.
I'm not sure whether he got Kelly off ZipRecruiter, but he should have looked there.
Exactly, because with ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to 100 plus job sites with just one click. And then their powerful technology efficiently matches the right people to your job better than anyone else. And that's why ZipRecruiter is different, because unlike those other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them. In fact, over 80% of jobs posted on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in just 24 hours. And, I don't know for sure, but I bet if Donald Trump placed an ad on ZipRecruiter for communications director, ZipRecruiter wouldn't have suggested Anthony Scaramucci.
Probably wouldn't have gotten the mooch.
No, not at all. And with ZipRecruiter, there's no juggling emails or calls to your office. You just screen, rate, and manage candidates all in one place with their easy-to-use dashboard. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. And right now, Politics Guys listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/politicsguy. That's ZipRecruiter.com/politicsguy. Wait, what was that? Yes, you got it.
Just no S on
there you
that,
go.
Right?
ZipRecruiter.com/politicsguys to post jobs for Politics Guy to post jobs for free. Okay, moving on. This week, President Trump signaled support for a Senate Republican proposal to cut legal immigration to the United States by half in the next decade. Now, the plan represents really a sweeping change to U.S. immigration policy, largely by making it much harder for many immigrants who are already legally in the country to sponsor their relatives. Now, instead of this family-based system, which is how most immigrants currently come to the United States, the proposal would be a so-called merit-based system, with applicants being favored not based on whether or not they have family in the United States, but instead on job skills, education, ability to speak English, and other sort of things like that. So, Jay, what's your first take on this proposal?
I'll tell you, my initial thought was, how does this even make sense? Why would, if the Trump focus has been on let's stop illegal immigration, which I think is something most everyone can agree on, at least most Republicans, and I would say most conservative, a good bit of conservative Democrats can agree on. Why tackle this? To me, I think the 50% reduction seems sort of arbitrary, and I'm not sure why we have that number. The piece of it of trying to make the criteria more skill-based, more merit-based, I'm all for that. But my sense is, and from what I've read from the business community, a lot of them feel that we have the capacity to take on more than plenty of new skilled immigrants. So I don't get the arbitrary cutoff unless it's sort of a bargaining thing. Now, the other piece I think to this is the common sense, sort of the word on the ground is this bill isn't going to go anywhere, and it's just sort of a flag to stick in the ground a little bit to say, hey, I'm doing something on immigration. But from a policy standpoint, I'm not crazy about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two ways to look at this. I agree from a economic policy standpoint, and then from a another standpoint I'll get to in just a minute, but from the economic standpoint, it seems to be there's a fair amount of consensus among economists that this kind of thing wouldn't necessarily lead to more jobs. In fact, the more likely outcome is it leads to more automation when businesses don't have access to that low-wage labor and they just go ahead and further automate things instead of paying higher wages. And the second point, kind of related to this, is this argument that, well, these people are taking jobs that Americans would otherwise take. There's really not much evidence of that as well. Now, the only sector that tends to be slightly hurt by immigration in this sense are Americans without high school education. So there's a slight effect there. But overall, the business community isn't in favor of this. It's kind of an economic non-starter. And so I think that comes back then to why would this sort of thing be proposed? And then you have to kind of look to the Steve Bannon influence, the kind of, I'm not going to say that Steve Bannon is absolutely alt-right, but certainly Breitbart has, pushed some alt-right type of stuff. That whole kind of thing. Well, this is a cultural argument. We are a white European nation, and these are our values, and we bring these other people in, and it subverts, corrupts, whatever American values. Now, I obviously don't buy this argument even a little bit, but there are a lot of people who I think believe this sort of thing. And, I think this gets to, this idea of, and it was brought up right at one of the press conferences about what about that stuff on the Statue of Liberty about, give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. Well, only if they have an MBA or something like that. But this to me really ties in well with a post that Trey made this week on Facebook. And he was talking about, you have to stay with me here for a minute. He was watching the Andy Griffin show, I guess showing it to his kids or something like that. And, he's talking about what are those sort of values and that sort of thing. And I thought about that, what are those kind of, Mayberry obviously never existed in a lot of ways, but what are those values? Well, community, family, looking out for each other, that sort of thing. And those, I think, are some of the values that largely animate and drive our immigration policy in this country, because it's based on keeping families together, allowing family members to, get into the United States as groups or bring in other family members, that sort of thing. And I think that is in the best tradition of American values. And this proposal moves to replace that with no, we're just going to focus more on economic values. And that to me is that is a change far for the worse. And that's not to say that we shouldn't try to bring in the best and the brightest from around the world and welcome them with open arms. Certainly we should, but we shouldn't do that at the expense of families, I think.
Well, the other thing that troubles me a little bit, I don't know that anyone's really talked about this, but if you are going to curb legal immigration by a fairly significant amount, and not just amount, but quality of people who are able to apply and get in legally, does that create a perverse incentive for more illegal immigration? Which is what we're trying to stop in the first place. I think a lot of times the traditional conservative position, the Reagan conservative position, had been that we welcome immigrants for the economic benefit they bring, for the there's a political benefit, sort of what you just referred to, that of being the shining city on the hill where people want to go to, as seen as the beacon of freedom, and we want that to be communicated throughout the world. So I think there was that Republican tradition. Again, it's maybe a tradition of 30 years ago, but of opening legal immigration. Now, again, that's making sure we're bringing in people who aren't criminals, people who are able to support themselves, whether it's just through particular skills or just real hard work. But this would seem to move in a contrary direction to that. And again, I just don't get it either policy wise or strategy wise.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, and then that in the best tradition of conservative Republican thought, there is a very strong moral element. And that moral element, I think, is something that we don't see in a whole lot of what President Trump is proposing, and this is just the latest example, because I don't necessarily think he's animated by that sort of thing. I think he's just animated by amoral materialism, Wall Street is in Michael Douglas, greed is good kind of stuff, and the rest of it is all just a whole bunch of just BS.
But again, Wall Street's on the other side of this. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, that kind of Wall Street. Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, before we move on, we'd like to say thank you to our second sponsor for today, Blue Apron, the #1 fresh ingredient and recipe delivery service in the United States. Their mission is to make incredible home cooking accessible to everyone. I said it before, it even works for me. I am a certified crazy, insane mess in the kitchen. And they do it all with super fresh, high quality ingredients. They partner with local farms, fisheries, and ranchers across the country, and they source ingredients to support a sustainable food system. Now, Jay, you get Blue Apron meals. What do you and your family think about them?
I love them. We love them. They're delicious. They're easy to make. It is a neat kind of family activity that you can introduce your kids to cooking, and you save a lot of the steps that are more laborious and messy. So I think it's fantastic, and I can't recommend them enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have some great upcoming meals. Listen to this: they have black pepper beef with bok choy and garlic rice, barramundi and garlic mashed potatoes with corn and tartar sauce. And let me see if I get my tongue around this one. Yakiniku glazed eggplant with shishito peppers and ginger lime cashews. It's like an international education and great food. And it's a really great value too, because less than $10 per person per meal, and it's delivered right to your door. Check out this week's menu and you will get your first 3 meals free with free shipping. Just go to blueapron.com/TPG. You will love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So don't wait. That's blueapron.com/TPG. Blue Apron, a better way to cook. Okay, moving on. Jay, there was some good news on the economic front this week, with the Labor Department reporting that 209,000 jobs were added in July, which was actually above Wall Street estimates. And along with this, we've got a soaring stock market, an unemployment rate of just 4.3%, and that's the lowest it's been since early 2001. But
He's making America great again.
But of course, when President Trump took to Twitter, of course, to claim credit for all this, he somehow forgot to mention that job growth over his first 6 months in office is actually slightly less than it was for President Obama's final 6 months. And he also didn't have anything to say about continued anemic wage growth. And finally, I want to point out, it's interesting to me how those Labor Department figures that Donald Trump is, trumpeting now, those are that's from the same Labor Department that he said put out phony figures less than a year ago. So I don't know. I guess for some reason they're no longer fake news. Jay, what do you think about all this?
Look, I think it's good. It's good news, regardless who takes the credit for it. My point, a lot of this stuff, particularly the stock market surge, the post-Trump surge, has been not from anything that Trump has particularly done policy-wise or promised to do policy-wise, but just simply sort of the stuff that he's not going to do or you don't expect him to do. So there's sort of that uncertainty has been taken out of the market from a regulatory sense. So I think that's helped. I'm still not sure because I have not seen what the labor participation rate has done. That's always a big asterisk for me. Anytime you're talking about the unemployment rate, whether it's President Obama or President Trump, if the unemployment rate's going down, great. But if that labor participation rate isn't going down or is getting bigger, that doesn't necessarily indicate a great amount of health. Now, when you're down to the numbers we are, I think you can say, yeah, that's still pretty healthy. But if there's still folks on the sidelines, that's not good.
Yeah. And, for the last 4 or 5 years, it's actually been pretty stable, right between like 62.9 and 63 or 63.2, right in through that range. So pretty stable, really fun since around 2012 on. So, and right now it's 62.9, and it's been pretty much right around there for all of 2017, and it's been right around the same for, like I said, for the last 4 or 5 years. So that's been a stable.
So not a huge number of people coming back into the labor force now. And again, some of that may be disability, maybe retirement, but regardless.
Yeah. And to give you a sense, in 2001, 2002, that rate was around low 67, like 67.1, 67.2, that kind of thing. So it is definitely declined, but part of that, like you said, we have that baby boomer demographic and so forth. But yeah, that's good that you pointed that out. I certainly would have if you hadn't. So and I think a larger point, though, and one that we don't, maybe that at least the mainstream media doesn't emphasize enough, is that when we talk about the Obama labor market or under Trump or something, it makes it sound like the president is controlling these massive levers that all of a sudden create jobs. And especially, I would think, Jay, for you as a conservative, that's like anathema. Government doesn't create jobs. I mean, the market.
No, exactly. No. And then that's consistent with what I said earlier. I think to the extent that we've had the stock market surge, it's not that Trump has done anything. It's just simply the malaise, the fever, we finally shed the virus of overregulation that had, I think, dogged the economy for a while.
Well, yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm completely that presidents or governments on their own don't simply create jobs. What they do is manage an environment in which the private sector can create jobs.
So, and I will say that a lot of businesses have said that the rollback of many regulations that Donald Trump has been able to do, because he doesn't need Congress to do that for the most part, has had a positive effect on business confidence. Initially, there was some thinking that he might actually be able to push through infrastructure and tax reform, and that seems a little less likely now. But also, you have to take a look at this in terms of the overall trends, and the overall trend is pretty much consistent from well before President Trump came into office. And so, again, presidents get way too much credit for when the economy is going well, way too much blame. And so does the Trump deregulation thing make a difference? I would say if it does, it's going to be really at the margins, at least to this point.
Yeah. I'd give it a bigger piece of the pie, but going more to the stock market part of it than to the employment part.
Yeah, and of course, that's another point, is that there's the stock market, then there's the real economy, and those are two very different things. For most Americans, that there's a very tenuous connection, if any at all. And so that's great if you're in the 1% or in the top 10% even, but if you're just a normal, regular, working Joe or Jane, that's you're looking more at those wage growth numbers, which are pretty crummy, actually. All right, Congress and the president are taking a break for the next few months. I'm guessing the Republican leadership is just exhausted from all that winning.
I'm tired.
Yeah. But, before they left town, the Senate managed to confirm dozens of Trump nominees, and this was due largely to Senate Democrats who agreed to stop their slowdown of the process, which was in protest of being shut out of any role in healthcare overhaul. But putting aside this confirmation bonanza, we're starting to see signs, I think, that the Senate, at least, is beginning to, if not ignore the president, at least to operate sort of as a co-equal branch of government, which, of course, is kind of what the framers intended. And one example of this was their move to hold pro forma sessions over the break so that President Trump can't take advantage of an adjournment to potentially fire Attorney General Jeff Sessions and make a recess appointment to replace him with someone more let's say malleable, without needing Senate confirmation, right? And I would say another sign of...
There was a time you were worried about Jeff Sessions being in the bag for Trump. But,
well,
go ahead.
No, and clearly he's not in the bag for Trump, although just as clearly he's pushing a lot of policies that I think are just absolutely dreadful. But another sign, I think, and maybe this is even more important, of greater Senate independence is that announcement this week by Senator Lamar Alexander of Tennessee. He's a Republican. He's chair of the Senate's Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. And he announced that his committee would begin work on legislation that is intended to stabilize Obamacare markets. And this is also joined by, in the House, there's a bipartisan group of, I think it's 35 at last count, that calls itself the Problem Solvers Caucus. They also announced an agreement on a series of measures intended to stabilize Obamacare markets. So what do you think, Jay? Is this, is at least, I mean, is at least,
well, I mean, is the Senate doing something? I think if they're stepping into the vacuum that has been left, I think that's a good thing. And continuing to talk, doing the preventing recess appointments, which again, you is sort of unusual when your party controls would control those appointments. I think that's all well and good, and I think maybe the Senate is realizing, and the legislature in general, that it's going to have to, sort of go it alone, absent some big changes from the administration. I'm less sanguine about the policy steps they're taking, although I understand why they're taking them. I mean, when you say stabilize the insurance markets, what that essentially is an infusion of cash, more subsidies, in order to keep propping up Obamacare. Now, that said, I mean that's maybe be necessary to keep the thing from collapsing until something new is created. But there's also the risk that we end up with sort of this permanent state if we keep coming in and keep stabilizing, and that's sort of the new entitlement. Not so much even for Americans, but it's entitlement for insurance companies. Which is problematic.
Yeah, and let's be just to be clear about this and to give people a little more context, that these subsidies that we're talking about were actually part of the law that Congress passed. Were part of the Affordable Care Act, and the issue is that while these subsidies that actually help insurance companies insure the sickest who have incur the highest costs, while these were part of the law, that money was never actually separately appropriated. And so what the Obama administration did is they went ahead and spent that money, or pushed out that money to the insurance companies anyway. House Republicans brought suit against that, and that's still pending, whether or not that these appropriations, this funding is actually something that the executive branch can do. But while that has been pending, the Obama administration and then the Trump administration has continued to keep this up, because basically without this, the insurance companies based their rates and based their planning on this law being enacted as it was passed. And now there's this uncertainty about this, especially because the Obama administration said, well, we're just going to do this. Whereas the Trump administration has made it kind of a month-to-month sort of thing, saying, well, we'll do it this month, but we'll see about next month. And of course, there's no policy reason to do that. Either you are in favor of doing this or you aren't. And doing it from month to month creates the sort of uncertainty and instability that just is anathema to insurers. And so naturally, that's going to cause them to jack up their rates because they have to account for worst case scenarios.
Sure. And I would agree. If Congress were to do an appropriation, a limited appropriation for this, that might be a good step. Say, okay, it's here's the subsidies they're approved for the next year. That puts the some confidence in the markets of, okay, well, at least we know where we are for the next year. It also puts a timeline on here's what we need to get done before we are in this problem again. So I could be okay with that, but. Again, it's sort of a weird legal situation in which the trial court has essentially said they think that the way this is being done right now is probably unconstitutional. But the parties had agreed to a stay of any enforcement of that order pending, hoping to get a new healthcare bill done. So that is still hanging out there. But I think it's well and good the Senate's taking some action to stabilize it. My concern is creating another long-term entitlement if we don't get a more permanent solution.
Yeah, and I think this is the way that the process should have started in the first place, with Senate and House committees having hearings, getting input from both sides. And sure, maybe at some point, you say, well, the Democrats aren't going to go along with anything. They're being intransigent in their demands and so forth, if you're the Republicans, obviously. But at least you start with the regular order. The sort of thing that Mitch McConnell promised he would do, and then just said, "Well, the hell with that." Essentially, when push came to shove, and even if you hate Obamacare, and a lot of people do, at least the Obamacare process started that way. It wasn't this Democrats only thing in secret. And sure, that was after a point when they said, well, just Republicans aren't going to go along with any of this. They went their own way. But you start that way. And if for no other reason, you can say, hey, we made an effort to bring the other side in. And clearly Republicans didn't do this. And I think it was, at least if it wasn't an opportunity to craft some sort of bipartisan legislation that the president would sign, at least it was a way of showing that, hey, we're not going to be my way or the highway. The optics of it, as they say, would be a lot better, and it's just a sad state where we don't even pretend to try bipartisanship in any of this stuff, So, all right. Moving on, it is time for what we're reading, where we step back from the crazy pace of the news cycle and talk about the more in-depth, thoughtful things we're reading, listening to, or watching. Jay, you mind if I start off this week?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I am recommending this week a podcast called Global Dispatches. And this is a great show. It focuses on foreign policy and international affairs. I know a lot of listeners are really interested in that. We focus more obviously on domestic stuff. So if you're desiring a fix for the more foreign affairs stuff, this is a great show. Not too long ago, I talked briefly with the host, Mark Goldberg, about his show. And here's what he had to say about his podcast. If you could just tell listeners a little bit about how long you've been doing the show and, what you try to do with it and that sort of thing, I think that would be great.
Sure. So Global Dispatches is a couple years old now. And what we try to do is introduce listeners to the personalities behind the big ideas, events, and influences that shape how we understand the world. So we do long profile interviews with personalities in foreign policy, people that your audience may know, sometimes people that your audience might know, high profile journalists like Fareed Zakaria or high profile academics like Joseph Nye have been on the show to discuss the big events and ideas and influences that shaped their worldview from an early age and propelled their careers in foreign policy. And we often have digressions about historic foreign policy events in which their life or career intersected in some meaningful way.
Yeah, I just recently saw you recently posted an interview with Graham Allison, and I'm really looking forward to that. I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but for those of you who are into international relations, he is a very big deal, and I'm sure that's going to be an excellent interview. Really looking forward to it.
It was fun. It's a pretty good distillation of what I do. I didn't have as much time with him as that I would have liked, but we spent a good deal of time talking about his most recent book. But perhaps more interestingly for me, we talked about his first book and the intellectual origins of his seminal study of the Cuban Missile Crisis, right, which if your listeners are into or have ever taken an International Relations 101 course, they've probably read. It's called Essence of Decision, and it presented some groundbreaking new analytic lenses, new ways in which we understand how foreign policy operates through his groundbreaking study of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he kind of tells me not the details of his results of his famous work, but really the ideas behind it and how he got interested in that topic and some key moments during the research of the book, including a conversation he told me he had with Bobby Kennedy, in which it was a look in the eye of Bobby Kennedy that led Graham Allison to one of his key insights in Essence of Decision. So it's pretty interesting, kind of fun stories I'd never heard.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, I'm really looking forward to checking that out. And again, I would encourage listeners, if you just look back through the past episodes, there is so much there, a lot of really amazing stuff, and I think you'll really love it. And Mark, I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us a little bit about your show.
Thank you. Yeah, and I should also say we also do shorter episodes every week that shine a spotlight on topical global issues that are oftentimes off the radar of mainstream media. So we'll kind of explain the latest crisis in Africa or how the peace was secured in Colombia, or shone a spotlight on like the latest global population figures coming out of the UN. So it's a varied kind of foreign policy experience I think your listeners will get.
Yeah, that kind of stuff that you don't necessarily get when everyone's talking about President Trump's latest tweet or something like that. So that's valuable. Yeah, that's very valuable stuff and the kind of thing that we're really into. So again, thanks so much for taking the time, and listeners, definitely this is a show you should put on your podcast list for sure.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Jay, so what's your recommendation for this week?
My recommendation comes from Thursday's Wall Street Journal, an article regarding mobility from rural areas to the cities, and discussing, there was a piece in National Review a year or so ago by Kevin Williamson that was really sort of controversial for those who follow this, and the gist was, look, if you're in one of these places where the economy is tanked, you're in one of these dead towns, I mean, then get up and move, go somewhere else. And many saw that as sort of heartless. And this takes a look at, again, the broader trend indicating that there is less mobility now than there used to be, and looking at some of the reasons for that. And I think it's sort of a sad kind of piece in that this Mayberry sort of, and again, it ties in with that, to the extent places like that existed, they're not existing anymore, or it's just a holdouts there. But, it cites all these other reasons why people don't move. I mean, and it's family support, it's church support, it's just familiarity, and it's cultural shifts. If some people don't want to live in the same world that of the big city. Some people want to be in Mayberry, and maybe you can't anymore. But we'll post that on the website, and then I think that one's public, not behind a paywall. So, but again, it's just one of those pieces that you start to wonder, if there is mobility, that everybody just moves, do we reach a point where no one's going to move anymore? And maybe that's just where we are. So,
and I think that brings up something I've been thinking about a lot, and there was Trey's post and the article that you mentioned, is that whole aspect of public policy and politics that I feel really gets devalued, and that's the cultural component of it, and
yeah. It's one of those things. You can't really measure it empirically is the problem.
Exactly, and I feel like there are so many of our institutions, whether it's religious groups or other things that used to be so important, and now so many of these institutions, these cultural institutions, just seem to be lagging, seem to be not so much in disrepute, but our focus tends to be so much more on how can I get more and make more and get more and make more. And I think for a lot of people, that just feels in a way kind of, I don't want to get all, communistic or anything on you or anything, but you know what I'm saying, certainly, I think, right? That there's a lot more to life than that. And yet so much of our policy, so much of our politics discussion focuses squarely on getting more and making more. And a lot of that good stuff, I think, gets left behind. And that's really tragic.
Well, I would say there was a book years ago, back in the late 80s, I believe, called Bowling Alone, which talked about sort of those civic institutions that, were looked upon by Alexis de Tocqueville as sort of a fundamental part of America. The bowling league, the Rotary Club, the church, the garden club, the Boy Scouts, the whatever else, these non-government civic organizations that allowed for communities to kind of pull together, and you met new people doing that at those things, and created this sense of community that I don't think exists as much anymore. I don't want to say it's gone, and I think it varies from place to place. But yeah, with Trey's piece on Mayberry, I think that's one of the things that we're sort of missing, is that those community attachments are becoming more and more tenuous, I think, in a lot of places.
Yeah. And I think that's something that liberals and conservatives can agree on,
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it for this episode. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We hope you liked what you heard and that you'll check out today's sponsors. ZipRecruiter first, where Politics Guys listeners can post jobs for free by going to ziprecruiter.com/politicsguy, and Blue Apron. Check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/TPG. You know, listener support is a huge help to us and greatly appreciated. If you're interested in joining our awesome group of Politics Guys supporters, you can go to politicsguys.com and click on the Patreon link. And if you want to support the show without spending anything, you can share this episode with your friends and followers or pass along our new show posts and tweets on Facebook and Twitter. Also, leaving reviews and ratings on iTunes also is a help. If you got a question, comment, correction, or just a random thought you want to share, you can reach us at mail@politicsguys.com. Our Facebook page where you can message us and where we post throughout the week is facebook.com/politicsguys page. We're also on Twitter @politicsguys. The executive producers of the Politics Guys are Michael Baranowski, Jay Carson, Trey Orndorff, and Bruce Johnson. The show was produced by Michael Baranowski. We'll be back with a new show on Wednesday. We hope you'll join us.